Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, an absolutely incredible chapter of history. We're focusing on two monumental figures. Their lives, and perhaps more impactfully, their deaths, really shaped the Western world. We're unpacking the martyrdoms of Saints Peter and Paul in ancient Rome. And our goal isn't just to recount events, but to pull out those, surprising insights into how their legacy endured. It's quite a story where terror, maybe ironically, sowed seeds of flourishing even under intense persecution. Okay, let's unpack this. So our journey kicks off dramatically. We're in 64 CE, Rome, the Great Fire. Emperor Nero, he's desperate to shift the blame away from himself, and he finds a convenient scapegoat, this small emerging group, the Christians. What happened next was, well, brutal. A calculated persecution, a terrifying attempt to just stamp out this new faith. The sources, they graphically detail what they called exquisite punishments. I mean, just imagine we're talking about Christians being used as human torches, or facing wild animals in the arena, laceration, and of course, crucifixion. The terror must have been immense.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, something often overlooked, is how Roman law wasn't just, the tool of persecution. It was actually a critical factor in deciding the specific fates of Peter and Paul. The method of execution, that was a stark reflection of social status.
Right, that's a crucial distinction. So explain that a bit more. Why would Roman law dictate different ways to die? What does that tell us?
Well, crucifixion, that was generally reserved for non-citizens, slaves, rebels, the lowest classes. It was designed as a public spectacle. Extreme humiliation, prolonged suffering, really meant as a deterrent.
Okay, a warning.
Exactly, whereas beheading by the sword, that was considered a swifter, maybe even a more honorable death in their eyes. It was often the method granted to Roman citizens, even if they were condemned criminals. And this legal nuance, this difference, fundamentally dictated how Peter and Paul would meet their ends.
And it's precisely that distinction that leads us into their individual stories. Let's start with Peter. The humble fisherman. He famously became known as the Rock of the Church. His journey from denying Jesus during the Passion to, well, embracing his own martyrdom, it's profound. That powerful legend, right? That he was fleeing Rome during the persecution.
The Quo Vadis story. Legend says he met the risen Christ on the road outside the city, and Peter asks, "Quo vadis, Domine?" Lord, where are you going?
And the reply.
Jesus replies, "To Rome, to be crucified again." And that compelled Peter to turn back, to face his destiny.
Wow. And then in this ultimate act of humility, he makes that request, to be crucified upside down. He felt unworthy, apparently, to die in the exact same manner as Jesus. It's such a powerful symbol of repentance.
Absolutely. And then you have Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles. His story is equally dramatic, maybe even more so in its beginnings. He started as Saul, remember, a zealous persecutor of Christians himself.
Right, until that blinding encounter on the road to Damascus. A complete transformation.
A total turnaround. And from then on, Paul embarks on these tireless missionary journeys all across the Roman Empire,
establishing Christian communities everywhere he went.
Yeah.
But it's not just the communities, is it? His letters, his epistle.
Foundational. Absolutely foundational.
Letters like Romans, Corinthians.
Yeah.
They essentially codified and clarified core Christian beliefs. They shaped theology for centuries, still do.
Exactly. And if we loop back to that point about Roman law, Paul's Roman citizenship, that's key. It meant he was spared crucifixion. That degrading death wasn't for citizens. Instead, he faced martyrdom by the sword, beheaded for his preaching, essentially. It's often framed as his final good fight, a swifter end, a privilege, if you can call it that, of his status.
So you have these two figures, hugely different backgrounds, very different paths. One a fisherman, the pastoral rock. The other a Roman citizen, a scholar, a theological architect. Yet they're celebrated together, aren't they, as the twin founders of the church in Rome?
Precisely. Peter often represents that foundational authority, the sort of pastoral leadership, while Paul embodies the missionary energy, the intellectual depth, the outreach to the wider world. Their joint martyrdom in Rome really solidified the city's central importance for Christianity. And it symbolized the universal nature of the church they were building, reaching both Jews and Gentiles.
And what's truly remarkable, and you touched on this, is how Nero's brutal attempt to wipe out Christianity just backfired.
It really did. The sources suggest it had the opposite effect. These public, terrifying executions meant to extinguish the faith. They instead seem to amplify its message. The courage of the martyrs inspired conversions.
Forged a stronger identity among believers, maybe.
Definitely. It turned fear into a kind of fierce solidarity. It really highlights that counterintuitive power of witness. It's often said the blood of martyrs is the seed of the church.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's worth considering the profound impact of Peter and Paul's sacrifices. Their stories, they remind us that faith can somehow transform suffering into a form of victory. That even when facing unimaginable terror, the greatest sacrifices can plant seeds of hope that last for millennia. Their feast day, by the way, is celebrated together on June 29th. So what does all this mean for you listening now? Maybe think about how challenges, even persecution in different forms, can sometimes lead to unexpected growth. How adversity can strengthen a movement, or even an individual, often in ways that just defy simple logic. Something to ponder.